Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Latest in Travel podcast by Guestcentric. I'm very excited to have with me today John McAuliffe, who currently serves as a strategic advisor for SaaS companies worldwide. He has extensive experience coaching CEOs of technology and e-commerce companies on scaling and growing their business. So, hi, John. It's great to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Melissa.
Great. And I gave like a brief introduction, but do you mind just expanding a little bit on, for those who are watching and might not know,
Sure.
what you do and what you've been up to?
Yeah, okay, sure, fair enough. I guess I'll start with, I've been pretty fortunate in my career. I've led a number of a number of businesses that were small and grew into larger businesses. And I've been there from when they were the very small, messy, chaotic, say yes to everyone's survival stage business, and grew them into these predictable machines that reliably and consistently acquire new customers and grow revenue. I guess the reason I say that is because it's given me a great front row seat, if you will, to experiencing and making a lot of mistakes. It's also given me the opportunity to make some decisions that were the right decisions. But I think both of those together provide a great opportunity for me to pass on to the next generation of entrepreneurs on how to navigate that journey that they're on in building and growing their businesses. So these days, in particular, I work with CEOs and boards as well, and they bring me in to help them figure out how to scale their business in a more consistent, repeatable, and predictable manner. My focus is focus. I help CEOs who have already built something that is impressive go to that next stage and build something even greater.
Great. And what did you do like initially? Was this something that you always envisioned yourself doing, or was it sort of a career path that found you, or how did it come about, this journey and this interest?
Yeah, there's a line that Jeff Bezos asks people when he's in an interview, and he asks them, "Are you lucky?" And I think that that's really the path for most people's career, is you're just lucky. Things just happen to you as you move along, and as long as you are aware and keep open to opportunities, that path will continue to open up for you. So, I consider myself by profession a marketer. I started my career in advertising. I worked for one of the largest global agencies in the world. I worked on some iconic consumer brands like Jaguar, Land Rover, Four Seasons Hotels, KFC, Nestle, Cadbury, and many other ones. And I think, when I look back at it, this was the start of something that I've always been curious about, and that I've been able to weave through the path of my my career journey, and that is how do customers buy things? It seems to be the foundation for many of the roles that I took on after my years in advertising. From advertising, I moved into a consumer research and consulting firm, and that just again amplified the time that I spent learning and understanding how people buy things. It was a chance opportunity that came to me through that company. I was working with a software vendor, a B2B software vendor in Silicon Valley, and that opened my eyes to a whole new world of business. I had never been in software or technology prior to that, or vertical software for that matter. And that took me on the journey of vertical software. I then spent 10 years running a company called Leonardo, which your audience might be familiar with. And before the sale of the company, after the sale of that company, I went on to run another travel technology company called Achiga that was in the web content management and e-commerce space. And we sold that business in the fall of 2019, which for a travel technology company was pretty good timing. And since that time, I'm now on, what I call my contribution years. And I'm really focused on how do I help that next generation of CEO, that next generation of entrepreneur, on strategy, on planning, on leadership, and on the growth challenges that they have.
That's really interesting, and it's actually it's popped a question into my mind given your experience, and I think something that people that I know that want to start a business just from ground zero, basically. I think the challenge that I often hear, because I have a few friends that or people in my network that want to do this, but it's just there's this overwhelming flood of ideas and not knowing where to start. And this is for me, $1 million question. People always ask this to, in conversation. So what would be your, I guess your insight on that? Where would people start, in getting those ideas and distilling it into one thing and focusing on one area?
Right. There's a number of things to unpack in that. The first is I'll say that to me, the first thing I'll say is to me that there's a difference between a founder and an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur can be a founder, but not all founders are entrepreneurs. And I think there's a driving element that differentiates the two of them. I think Steve Jobs actually one time pointed this out, and it's passion. Passion is one of these attributes that is both your Achilles heel and the thing that can bring you to greatness. Because when you're passionate about something, it's really hard to give it up.
Yeah.
But there's this fine line with sometimes you have to give things up in order to become successful. And this is the classic pivot that people talk about in business. Great entrepreneurs understand that balance and are able to hold on long enough that it can become successful, or get rid of something in an idea that is not going to be successful and pivot to something else, right? So my point of saying that is keep that in mind if you are a founder wanting to start a business, because you can still found a business, but if you don't have some kind of driving underlying passion to it, you probably won't make that leap to entrepreneurship, right? I think that also ladders into the second thing is typically great businesses are started because someone has said, I think the way that people are doing things today is just wrong. Maybe it's inefficient, maybe it's just a waste of energy, whatever it happens to be. But they've seen how someone is solving a problem today, and they go, "There's a better way to do that." And that's really, through observation that you find those kinds of things. And so the best is typically when entrepreneurs or founders have a hypothesis, and they say, "Here's my hypothesis as to what I think needs to be done," and then they go into the market to validate that hypothesis and understand whether somebody is actually prepared to pay money in order to solve that problem or enable that hypothesis that they have.
Yeah, that makes sense, I guess. So understanding if the idea would actually be of value to your market. Is that?
Yeah. There, and I don't know how much your audience listens to people in the, SaaS business. It seems to be this ecosystem all in of itself. But in SaaS, there's this obsession with what they call product market fit, which I think is just, a poorly worded term. It should be market product fit. You shouldn't be designing a product and trying to figure out what market it goes into. You should be looking at a market and designing a product that actually solves a problem in that market. But the part about market product fit that most people get, or most people don't take into consideration, are like they'll go, I have strong market product fit because people are buying my product, or they are renewing their subscriptions with me. I'm selling it, I'm monetizing it. But what they don't typically do is figure out how much value that they are deriving from doing that, proving that value. There's a question I often ask founders is, in your customers' words, what is the dollar value created by using your product? And many of them can't answer that question. If you can't answer that question, you're not proving value. If you're not proving value, you can't actually realize that value. You can't, realize charging someone for something if you don't know how much you're proving or giving them in value. So I think that's the part that they really need to dive into when they start going into the market, is understanding what is the value being created by solving this problem in the way that I'm trying to solve it.
Right. And this actually, I think it's a good lead into like our next question, which I guess is this notion of like talking to the customer to actually understand and rethink the customer journey a bit better. I think a lot of companies, it's like, oh, this is what we're doing and this and that, without really taking into consideration fully what the customers are saying. And I think maybe a part of this is also the fact that, there's so many channels and, you get so much marketing advice out there, do surveys, do this to get that customer feedback. And it can maybe be a bit challenging for smaller companies, or in our industry, hotels that have, less amount of resources. So what would be some of the practical ways, in your opinion, that these smaller businesses and hotels in our industry could really reach out to the customer and create that link, and then also understand what value they're creating for their customer base?
Yeah. So you're right. There's way too much information out there. You can spend all of your time just going through data and actually never doing anything. I think there's a real art in being able to sift through everything that you see or read or hear, and only filter in the stuff that actually is meaningful for you. And so I think we overcomplicate things, and I think there are some very simple things to keep in mind. And you also started with, saying that a lot of times we look at things and go, okay, so how do we sell this product? All right. And in the case of a hotelier, they could be saying, how do I sell more room nights? How do I sell, higher occupancy in my hotel? And I think, the first thing that I would recommend to a hotelier is change your mindset. This isn't about how do I sell more room nights. This is more about how do the customers that benefit the most by staying in my hotel, how do they actually go about buying and choosing a hotel to stay in? If you change that mindset, and the path that you go down is trying to get a better understanding, not on how to sell something, but on how the customer that you want to stay at your hotel goes about buying something. If you can change your mindset, you're half the way there. And in fact, you're probably way in front of your competitors, just thinking that way. So that's the first thing, as I would say, is just, start with changing your mindset. The second thing that I would say is, I don't think that business leaders, whether they're running a hotel or a Fortune 500 company or a mid-sized technology company, I don't think they talk to their customers enough. And I'll say more, I don't think they observe and talk to their customers enough. And I think that one of the most valuable things that you can do is talk to your customers. And I don't mean, running formalized market research programs like, 1,000-person guest surveys and focus groups and all of this stuff. I'm talking about small groups of customers and having insightful conversations between the business leader. In the case of a hotel, it would be the person that owns that hotel, and their customers. I oftentimes recommend to the CEOs that I work with that they have, a dozen in-person conversations between themselves and the type of customer that they want to attract. By talking to their customers, they can build a model of how that customer thinks, what they care about, what annoys them, what makes them happy, how they make decisions. By better understanding that model customer, if you will, they can then create hypotheses that shapes their business strategy and helps them define how they can attract more of those kinds of customers and win the game, if you will, in attracting those. I'll give you a perfect example. I mentioned earlier that I worked on the Four Seasons hotel accounts, and the first time I experienced this was actually with Izzy Sharp, the founder of Four Seasons Hotels. Most people would think that he spends most of his day, sitting in his office in meetings. He actually spent most of his time in hotels, and he spent most of his time in the lobby of the London Park Lane Hotel, which was one of their first, truly luxury hotels. And he spent his time talking to customers, but more importantly, observing what those customers were doing. He took the insights from those conversations and observations, and he created hypotheses around what he thought those customers would want as they're coming into a Four Seasons hotel. Some of those hypotheses failed. Some of them were successful. He then could take all the successful ones and start putting them into the other Four Seasons hotels so that he continued to leverage the capabilities and the strengths of his customer insights and understanding in all the Four Seasons hotels as well.
It's really interesting. So it's like more qualitative, approach rather than just trying to get masses of data and distilling it kind of.
Yeah. There's I'll probably mangle the quote, but there's a great quote from David Ogilvy, where he said, the problem with market research is people don't know what they feel. People don't say what they feel. People don't do what they say. So you need to observe how people interact. You need to observe behavior. That's going to tell you more than just listening to all of these data signals.
Yeah, that makes sense. And definitely, having those conversations, I could see the value in that and getting I don't know, I think it's, again, that thing of having a lot of information out there. For me, it's if you start in sort of that more, those more intimate, I guess, conversations with smaller groups, it sounds like a good way to go.
The other part to it, and sorry for interrupting, but the other part to it is you should be thinking about what you're looking for, right? And you should be designing your questions around what you're looking for. It's not just enough to ask questions. It's about, what should I be listening for? There's a thing that they in B2B in particular, and primarily because B2B is what I would call a high consideration product. In other words, people spend a lot of time evaluating and looking at their options before they buy. And I would think that most independent hotels would fit into a high consideration purchase product. Branded hotels, low cost hotels probably don't, but certainly independent hotels would fit into a high consideration product. And there's a thing called a priority initiative. There's typically a trigger that would trigger someone to even start looking for a hotel. One of the things in your conversations you should be looking for is what motivated that person to even decide they wanted to go on some kind of travel that required looking at a hotel that is similar, that is like the one that you have. That in and of itself gives you great insights into what leads people to actually choose a hotel of your type, let alone your particular hotel.
Yeah, and I mean, we see it a lot in our industry of like really the importance of understanding what the customer's journey is and what they want, and how that should reflect in the branding of the hotel. Like sometimes it doesn't reflect. There was actually a story that someone was telling me the other day of like there was a hotel very remote out in like, the middle of nowhere pretty much, and but because it wasn't being communicated, like on the channels, like this is what we're offering, this kind of very remote, outdoorsy kind of experience. They were attracting more of like these upscale clientele that were just like, oh, the rooms don't have air conditioning. Everything it's too eco, it's too hippie.
Right.
Hippy dippy for us, and then you kind of have that, so I guess it's the whole cycle, and it really shows the importance of understanding the customer and what they value for sure.
Well, and also understanding what your capabilities are. The part about being a brand, about brands is brands are what you do, not what you say. And that's a perfect example that you've just cited on, what they are is different than what they're saying. It's not to say that what they're saying is bad or what they are is bad. They're just different. And so that erodes trust that people have in that brand, right? And trust is part of the value equation that people evaluate their options on. And low trust just means that you've thrown out all of the benefits that you actually provide.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, I guess the consistency is key, the experience, like walk the talk, as they say. Very important. And in your opinion, I guess, sort of going back to the customer, understanding the customer better, for, I guess, like people that are using multiple channels or trying to, get different sources of that customer feedback to create like a picture of what their customers value, what would be your in what ways could companies integrate all that feedback and sort of distill it in a way that they can create a comprehensive and actionable map of what the customer journey looks like and then respond accordingly?
Right. Okay. So I guess there's really two different concepts in your question that I want to unpack. The first is feedback, and what is feedback and what isn't feedback. And the second is, how do you better understand the customer buying journey so that you can map your go-to-market to fit that, right? So let's start with the feedback. I come from the world of all feedback is good. It doesn't matter whether it's from a customer, whether it's from an employee, whether it's from a vendor, whether it's good feedback, whether it's bad feedback, it doesn't matter. So my first piece of advice to any hotelier is to listen to the feedback. That in and of itself will put you in a position that is way ahead of your competitors, because I don't think most listen to the feedback that they're actually getting. But the other part to the feedback is you really need to understand what you're listening to. Feedback can come in different ways, and some of it you can take literal, while other feedback you cannot take literal. I'll give you an example. There's some really famous quotes from what I would call legendary business leaders. The two that come to my mind are Henry Ford and Steve Jobs. Henry Ford had a famous quote that said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses. And Steve Jobs is famous for saying, it sounds logical to ask customers what they want and then give it to them, but they rarely wind up getting what they really want that way. And so you need to be careful about the literal translation of what you're providing to those customers, because customers are not the best at ideation of product.
Right.
You should be the best at ideation of product. What you should be doing is saying, what do they really need in order, and what should I build to satisfy that need, right? So the real question is, in what way should we listen to our customers? Which leads me to your question about the customer journey. And if your question is directly, can we use direct feedback like you would find in guest reviews to create the map of customer journey? I would say you can't. That's not how you're going to understand the customer journey. What reviews do is provide you feedback on what I would call measurements. That's the type of feedback that they're giving you. They allow for a comparison of the expected outcome that you wanted versus the actual outcome that you got. And then you can make a decision, a choice on whether you close the gap on the difference between those two, which would be, obviously what your strategy would be in that regard. But to better understand the buying journey, you actually have to understand more about more than just the channels that a customer uses. You need the behind the scenes story about, the work that customer did to evaluate options, to eliminate contenders, and to settle on their final choice. It's this insight that will help you better understand, who was involved in the buying journey with the person that actually made the actual purchase, and at what stage were they in that buying journey with them, what they did to arrive at the conclusions that they came to, how much influence each one of them had on that final decision. So it's this buyer's journey that will align your sales and marketing. And the best way to understand this is, again, go to the source. Get your customers, and I would say also your non-customers, because you want to know why you didn't attract who you wanted to attract, and what you need to do not to attract who you don't want to attract. But get both your customers and your non-customer story in their words. There's an interview technique that is used called "Take Me Back to the Day," and I'll give you a little bit more on that. But before I do, I want to emphasize that this is really important for businesses that have high consideration buying journeys. Right? This is not as valuable if you're in fast-moving consumer goods and you're selling gum at the checkout stand of a variety store, or if you're the low-cost leader, because low-cost leadership is not about differentiation. It's typically for products that have high differentiation or high consideration in their purchase, and I would assume that most independent hotels have that as part of theirs. So take me back to the day you first decided to search for and evaluate the options around hotel accommodation in Paris, and tell me what happened. That is the opening question and the only scripted question in an interview that should help you better understand what triggered the search and why, what options they looked at, including where to buy, a channel, for example, the criteria that they had around the decision, their concerns and fears or their barriers to actually, that they saw maybe on your hotel, maybe on somebody else's hotel that prevented them from buying, what success looks like. There's an adage in sales that says people don't buy your product, they buy what their life looks like after they've used your product. And so you want to look at what success looks like is what their life looks like while they're staying at your hotel, or what they envisioned it to look like. And then the journey, including everybody else that was involved in the stages that they went through. So my point to that is with that opening question, and then using your customers' words to probe further, you know what you're looking for, and you can engage in a conversation that helps you get a better insights into the journey that customer went on. If you do a dozen of these interviews, you will have a better understanding of the core reasons why your hotel was chosen, why it wasn't chosen, and the story behind the scenes of how your core customers move from day one to actual purchase.
And it's quite a nuanced approach, which something that struck me of like what you just said in your answer was this notion of customers not, like you ask it's not just simply asking them, oh, what do you want? But like, also communicating the value. Sometimes, even with a product, there might not be that full understanding of what the product can do. I don't know if that like makes sense, but for example, I think this is something like with technology companies, and if your market is like sort of layman, market, it's like, yeah, what was that process? How did you choose these solutions or whatever that you decided to go with? I think that's right. That's quite an interesting approach.
Yeah, and to your point, people will give you a very cursory answer initially, and typically that cursory is surface level, and it's typically very feature functionality oriented. And it's not just for tech companies, it's for any high consideration product. So, why did you stay at that hotel? I like the look of the facade of the hotel. And that's really not going to tell you anything. Like, how actionable is that? I mean, I can't change the facade or the look of the hotel, right? But the part that's important is understanding why that was important to the person. There's a technique that was made famous by Toyota it's either called the 5 whys or the 7 whys. I think over time, people have added the number of whys to the original theory. But the point being is when someone gives you an answer to the question, you should be going, well, why was that important to you? So if you like the facade of the look of the hotel from the outside, why was that important to you? Oh, I really like, architecture and design. Why is that important to you? Well, I think that it has a lot to do with, who we are as a nation and how our history unfolded during times. If you can dig deeper and deeper, you will get the understanding and the insights behind all of that. And that can help you in the conversations that you have, with people on the channels that you sell your products on, right? We're the epitome of architectural history in Portugal, is a much better way of connecting with a consumer than saying, hey, we've got a great looking hotel.
Yeah, and I guess also in the win-win of it is that the customer also feels valued and that they're taken into consideration, and you're not just, I think that's the pitfall, like you see with a lot of companies, that it's like they're talking like this is us and this is, but it's like, are you actually talking to the customer?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's, it's a little bit alienating. So I guess with this approach, it's good because the customer can, they feel like the part of the journey, as it were.
Yeah.
Great. And sort of going back to your experience, I guess, in coaching companies on building and scaling their business, and sort of bringing it to the hotel industry specifically. Let's say, like, a hotel owner wants to transition from just establishing their hotel in the market to scaling it and growing it. What would be, in your opinion, like the key indications or indicators to consider for scaling up? And at what point should they consider expanding their capacity or diversifying their service offerings or even opening up in new locations? Like, what would be the map for that?
Yeah, I guess, in the context of a hotel, actually in the context of all businesses, scaling and expansion are really different concepts. For hotels, I would equate scaling to, adding more hotels to my brand. Whereas expansion would be, how do I add new products to the hotels that I have? How do I add restaurants or grab and go or spa to that? So they're different concepts, and the signals, if you will, you would look for are different. So let's take scaling the first. People oftentimes think scaling is a huge job. It's not a huge job if you have the right foundation. Now, that foundation might be different based on your business. The foundation of a hotel might look much different than the foundation of a technology vendor. But the elements of that foundation that are similar is a very strong understanding of who your customer is and who your customer isn't. When you understand that, you can pursue deep understanding of your customers. And with that knowledge, you will know where you can expand and what you can scale and what doesn't need scaling. There's, and this has a lot to do with focus. Let me approach it from the other. When you don't have a great understanding of your customer, scaling is really, really hard because you try to do a lot of things. And everybody has finite resources. And I'll use the term resources. Resources are energy, time, money, all of that combined. And so if you think about it this way, if you take your finite resources and try to do a dozen things, you will probably do a half job at all dozen of them. If you take that same finite resources and do 2 things, maybe 3 things, you may be able to do 100% good job on both of those things. So the real key to scaling any business is doing the right things and only the right things, and not doing the things that aren't going to meaningfully make a difference in compelling your customers to do what you want them to do. So I'll full circle it back. Both scaling and expansion are directly related to the insights and understandings that you have about your customers and what would increase the value that they attach to your brand or your hotel.
Oh, that makes sense. And what would you, I guess, like when there's an initial hotel opening or a new brand on the market, there's like this initial value, or even in any new product or company that's launched, there's usually something very, special about it, or, it's, especially if it's something very innovative, then it's got this uniqueness and this quality and it stands out. What would be, in that scaling process, what would be your advice for owners to effectively balance maintaining the quality of their initial product, but then also, and keeping it unique during that like standardization required for scaling? Like, what would be some of the strategies employed to ensure that the core values and the service quality that define the initial success are not like diluted as the business grows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's start with your question about strategies. So the first is, let's define a strategy is just a set of choices, a set of decisions that you make. The strategy is one of these words that everybody fears because they think it's this complex thing that they do once a year. And I suspect that many hoteliers go, I don't really do strategy. I just run the hotel. But the reality is every business, whether it's a hotel or not a hotel, has a strategy, because every single day they make decisions about choices, and make decisions about making choices and not making choices. That is what a strategy is. And ideally, the choices that you're making are ones that are designed to help you win on the playing field that you chose to play on. So this goes to your point of differentiation. If my differentiation is that I have defined the playing field that I want to play on differently than my competitor down the street. And I have put together a series or a playbook or a set of choices on how I'm going to win on that playing field. And I have capabilities that I need in order to win. So the choices that I make leverage those capabilities. Scaling is about focus. Scaling is about making those choices and not other choices, eliminating the things that I shouldn't be doing as much as doing the things that I should be doing. It's about leveraging your core capabilities to win, putting your energy towards those things that matter. By definition, will give you greater scalability. So the strategy, and there's only one strategy, is to leverage your core capabilities, and that in and of itself will help you provide more of the right things to your guests, more of the things that they want. So by definition, if you deploy your strategy properly, you don't have to worry about losing the value and the quality of the service. If that's one of your core capabilities, that's where your energy, time, and resources should be spent, and not spent on something else that you're doing that isn't core to winning, right? So to ensure that a hotel continues to maintain the quality and uniqueness, I would say to any hotelier, determine, where you play, who are your customers, who are not your customers, what geographies, what products that you have, what channels that you want to communicate through. And I'm not just talking about selling. There are many hotels that, as part of their playing field, might have great presence on Instagram or TikTok, for example. So determine where you're going to play, determine how you're going to win. What is your differentiation? What is your value proposition? What is your competitive advantage? And then what capabilities do you need in order to win? If you spend your time defining those, all of your energy is going to go towards the capabilities that are required to win, and none of your energies are going to go to the capabilities that are not required to win.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. And I guess the question, another thing that kind of struck me is like with, I don't know, when you have that core consumer base, and then with the times, like when the consumer base changes, and sometimes businesses, I've seen it, like they get a bit attached to the initial, I don't want to say demands, but like needs and things like that. But then it's, I don't know, knowing like where to change along with that. Like I'll give an example. There was like I used to work for a health and weight loss company like way back in the day, and they predominantly their target demographic was like housewives, staying at home, things like that. But then I don't know, as times go on, it's like, okay, now teenagers need this kind of, health consciousness or awareness. But then,
right.
It's like the business was not wanting to pivot to that. So I don't know. I think the question with that is like, when there's these changes like this, how do you balance like not getting too attached to the initial, I guess, core thing,
Right.
but then also kind of, you know, pivoting to the changes in your, I guess, your target customers or your market essentially.
Right. So in strategy speak, what you're talking about there is the playing field changed. And the playing field can change based on a number of things. I'll give you another non-hotel example like yours. You know, Procter and Gamble went through the same thing, right? They were the leader in toothpaste for 30 years with Crest. And the differentiation of Crest was about fluoride. And they owned that playing field. They were the product that provided fluoride to people. And what ended up happening is over time, fluoride went from a differentiation to a commodity in everyone's toothpaste. The playing field changed for them, and Colgate came out with a product called Colgate Total, where they differentiated based on the healthiness of your whole mouth, gums, teeth, etc. They changed the playing field. That made Procter and Gamble have to change the playing field that they were going to have Crest play on, right? And what you're talking about there is, and this could happen with hoteliers as well, right? They over time, their differentiation is no longer a differentiation. So they now have to take a look at the playing field and say, what has changed? And should we look at this playing field differently? And if we look at it differently, do we need to change those things that we look at in order to win? And do we have to build new capabilities and get rid of old capabilities? And so you want to, this is one of the reasons why I say to people or to CEOs, strategy is a thinking process. It's not a planning process. It's a thinking process about where our business is going to go. And that is a continual process. It's not a one-time event. I encourage them to have strategic thinking sessions monthly, for example, that allows them to go back and go, we had a hypothesis that this was the playing field we were going to play on. This is how we were going to win. And this is the capabilities that we needed to do that. Has anything changed that should make us look at our hypotheses again and alter that?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I guess that's what happened with Tesla as well. And they like brought the electric cars into the market. Cool. So actually sort of moving on now to some of the trends, and I guess like with also drawing on your extensive experience and like working with technology companies and understanding that side of things really well. Some of the, obviously technology, it's very ubiquitous in all of our lives and impacting specifically also the hospitality and travel industry as well, quite significantly. So what would be sort of your recommendation? And like technology is a high consideration field, as you mentioned earlier, in terms of finding the right, partners or the right solutions to work with. How can, in your opinion, hotels balance that integration of emerging technologies in ways that enhance the experiences without losing the personal touch that is characteristic of the industry, and still offer those services, but like choose the right solution that makes sense for their business?
Right. Yeah. It's an all-consuming kind of thought. Mark Anderson was correct when he said software is eating the world. Technology is the new shiny ball. Every day, someone's coming out with a new technology to do something that we didn't even know was a problem that we had. And it can become very overwhelming. My counsel would be that the way to look at technology is as an enabler. It should be enabling what you need done. There's no point in looking at technology that's not going to do that. So choosing the right technology is first about determining, what can and what cannot be strengthened by leveraging technology. It should be integrated into your business strategy. So if you have a core capability that can be strengthened, amplified, enhanced by using technology, then you should use technology to do that. If there's technology that can't do that, then stop trying to fit, a round peg into a square hole, or the other way around. So, I think it relates to the business strategy that you have and the core capabilities that you require in order to execute on that strategy. So it's plausible that there's a hotel out there that has a business strategy that doesn't leverage technology at all to strengthen its core capabilities. Maybe that's the way that they differentiate. So that's not bad. That's just the differentiation strategy that they have. But I do suspect that many, however, do have capabilities that can be strengthened by using technology to automate or extend these capabilities. So the key is really, again, going back to your business strategy and using technology to strengthen your capabilities. And that's the way that you should be looking at how you select technology.
I totally agree with that. I think there's sometimes this pitfall of wanting to get all the fancy new bells and whistles. But yeah, sort of starting simple and aligning it with the strategy, and then I guess building from there as you go along. It makes total sense. And in the face of increasing digitalization and automation in, I guess, hotel services and stuff, what approaches would you say hotels can take to maintain and enhance that human-centric hospitality and ensure that technology complements this rather than sort of negates from the human side of their business?
Right. So I'll use Four Seasons Hotels as an example here again. They hire less than 10% of the applicants that apply for jobs there. They take the selection of those who will be the brand seriously, right? So they understand what their brand stands for. They understand what their strategy is. They hire people that can be that brand. They just don't hire everybody. That's the first thing that I think, differentiates how they do things from other hotels. So their recruiters aren't necessarily looking for people that have worked in hotels before. They're looking for those that are going to love serving customers, who are respectful and empathetic. Those who understand that the Four Seasons banner stands for and what it stands for, and who want to become part of their community, of their tribe, if you will. So in exchange for this, the authentic brand provides great opportunities for those who fit that brand profile. So it's interesting, they consciously go about recruiting employees as consciously as they go about compelling consumers that they want to stay at their hotels. And I think that's a shift for many people to make. So that allows them to have employees that are really part of that brand. So, unlike other competitors' hotels, by default, these people receive more training. They have more opportunities to be promoted within the organization. They have lower turnover than the industry average because they consciously put employee recruitment, training, and retention as part of their business strategy to strengthen the core capabilities of service and empathy to their guests. So, that's through an example, one way that hotels can ensure that as their their workforce grows, they can continue to be true to their brand.
Okay, so going back on, so it kind of aligns with what you said about technology being an enabler. And are there any other kind of ways that you can see technology sort of empowering hotels and their teams to add that and maintain that that guests or human-centric approach to their business? And using technology as an enabler for that rather than, it just sort of taking away from that human-centric
Right.
Service.
Yeah, I guess the first is we'll make the assumption that I'm a hotelier where a human-centric approach is one of the core capabilities of my strategy. There is a world out there where the strategy that a business can have would be, for example, a low-cost leader, and maybe low-cost leadership does not have a human-centric approach to it, right? But let's take it as a given. Technology as an enabler is to enable you to provide strengthened capabilities around what differentiates you as a business. So if I look at it as an enabler, there are many things that hotels could leverage in order to provide, let's call it a more personalized guest experience. And one of the first ones is even just a CRM, and a CRM that is connected to the applications that the staff use on their day-to-day basis. So there's nothing better than, from a personalization perspective, let's take, for example, a housekeeper knowing that room 701 is occupied by Mr. McAuliffe. And as I exit the room and happenstance walk past the housekeeping staff, and he says, "Good morning, Mr. McAuliffe," that is a much more personal greeting than just good morning. And so what that technology did was it strengthened the personal greeting, if that was core capability of my strategy, between the hotel and the guest. That's the type of thing that hoteliers should be looking at. It's not about having a CRM. It's about how do you actually leverage that CRM in order to strengthen the relationship or the core capabilities that you're delivering on for that guest in your hotel.
That's an interesting topic, actually, because it's so talked about personally. You hear it. It's one of those that I guess it's become a bit of a buzzword, and sometimes it's a little bit hard as well to, I don't know, I guess know where to begin in terms of personalizing the guest services.
Right.
And there's the obvious, I have the CRM and this and that, but what would be your advice, like in terms of the first step of understanding the best areas in which to personalize the guest experience, and distilling that data that you have, but aligning it with the value that you give to your guests?
Yeah. So let's start with personalization is really hard, because there's a fine line between doing it right, and doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And if you in other words, it's a tricky needle to thread. And if you do it wrong, it can have lasting consequences for your brand. It can sometimes be a little unsettling. Some people might say creepy. And at other times, it can just put us off the product altogether, right? The purpose of personalization from a marketing perspective is really about trying to increase the level of trust a customer has in your brand's ability to deliver on the promise that it's made to you. That's the reason for it, right? We do that by using data to tailor messages to my specific preferences. So, we've talked a lot about high consideration purchases. Trust is probably the difference in a high consideration purchase between choosing options that deliver very similar benefits. If there are two hotels that, in my mind, deliver the same benefits, have the same costs, I look at that and I go, their value to me is pretty similar. If I trust one, trust is an amplifier. If I trust one more than the other, that's the difference between whether I choose one or not. So personalization done that is specific to my preferences builds that trust, and that trust leads me to choices through it. So in that way, it can also do the exact opposite. And if that trust is, I often say, if trust is zero, it doesn't matter what your benefits are, because 0 times anything is 0. So if you have zero trust, you have zero value. But if you have a lower trust level because you haven't managed messages specific to my preferences, then that's going to erode the value that I see in choosing your hotel. I'll give you an example that's relevant to travel. It's not hotels, it's air. I do a lot of travel. I live in North America. I do a lot of travel. I do travel multiple times a year to Europe. And what I typically do is I will buy my ticket from North America to Europe in advance, but I never buy my intra-European flights in advance. Because too many things change, and I don't know whether I'm going to take a plane or a train or what it happens to be. So I typically buy those when I get over there. So last year I was in Madrid, and I needed to get to Dublin. So I bought a ticket on Aer Lingus from my hotel in Madrid and flew to Dublin. To this day, Aer Lingus sends me, personalized emails in Spanish.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yes. Now, it was their attempt to provide me more personalized, communication, but it failed, right? Like, they sent me communication in language that I understand poorly at best. They have all my information because I booked a flight with them. They know where my home is. They know, where I'm domiciled. They know what language I bought the ticket in because my browser had the language. They didn't use the information properly in order to do that. And so that's where I talk about threading the needle, and it's a tricky thread, is when you get it wrong, it just puts you off. You go, okay, you don't understand me.
Yeah, I've had creepy ones actually where it's like it's a conversation, and okay, I don't want to go all conspiracy theory, but like, you have a conversation about something with someone else, and it's about a specific thing, but it's nothing related to you or your preference or anything like that. But then you start getting ads or something related to this, but it's not even, it could even be something that you're annoyed about.
Right.
Or, or just something that's not, I mean, I'll use an example. Like, I knew someone who who had like a brief stint of alopecia, And she was quite distressed about that. And she was talking to me about it. And we had some conversations on that. And then I was getting ads of like, hair implants, and I don't need hair implants at all. Yeah. It's like, I've got more than enough hair. Thank you very much. And it was just strange, to get confronted. And I don't know, for me, when I see this, and especially when it interrupts me, I don't know, I want to watch something like a quick tutorial on YouTube or something like that, and I get interrupted with this ad that's like it's almost a bit creepy with how it's tuned into what I've been talking about, but not necessarily aligning with what I'm looking for or what I want. Has a very alienating effect.
This all comes back to what we talked about at the very first of the podcast is, the difference between how do I sell you something versus how do I help you buy something that you want. Right. And I think one of the downfalls of having this plethora of data is, what do you do with it? And we use data just to push stuff out. Whereas what we should be doing is saying, what is the data telling us? How is that data validating a hypothesis that we have about how our type of customer goes about buying our type of product? That's what they should be using the data for.
And I guess understanding the story behind that data to understand better the customers.
Exactly.
Great. Well, we're actually at the end of our time, and I think that's a good thought-provoking note to close on. But just before we go, just with it being the start of the year still, well, it's a bit late now to say Happy New Year, but like, what would you say you're looking forward to the most in 2024, and why?
Big question, I guess. I'll do one professional and one personal, maybe, if you will. Professionally, I'm looking forward to putting my thoughts and experiences in more articles and sharing those with founders on their road to entrepreneurship. Why? Because it's my fuel. I enjoy any contribution, helping young companies go from where they are to where they want to be. And I think, like I talked about at the front of the podcast, the benefit of a lot of experience and failure is you can help guide the next generation. And I'm looking forward to getting more of my thoughts and experiences into more articles to help do that. On the personal front, I'm looking forward to spending time and going on many more adventures with my friends and family. And again, why? Because it brings me joy.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, John. And thanks also for sharing your insights. It's really been a good learning for me as well, I have to say, and I'm sure for our audience as well. So thank you. And thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.